You know, I feel like there's two categories of musicians. There's those who have no problem picking up an instrument in any situation and playing and singing and sharing a song. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other category of people who the circumstances have to be just right, or it's precious. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're definitely in the former. And do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about if that's just in your culture or if that's just the way you've been all your life?
I think for me it goes back to being a child and watching my parents and how they would, you know, whether it be Sunday morning when my dad was having a shave or he was just in good mood or whatever point of the hangover he was in, the spiritual aspect arose and he sang in the morning. Or my mother, I remember my mother sitting us, I must have been very young, I think it might have been 5 years old, because my mother used to bathe us in the kitchen sink. And she had her fold-out record player, you know, the old classic ones with the, and it was up on the side of the thing, and she had two records. She had Simon Garfunkel's Sound of Silence and Leonard Cohen's, I think it might have been Leonard Cohen's Greatest Hits.
The yellow cover.
The yellow cover one. And I remember she taught my brother The Sound of Silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend. And we're sitting there in the bath and we're just being washed and the record's on beside us. And it's such a very clear memory. It was a bright orange kind of, you know, sort of leatherette cover on the record player. And I've come to talk with you again. You know, is there the vision softly creeping? And like my brother learning this with my mother, you know, and learning. And then for me, she had Bird on a Wire. Like a bird on a wire, like a drunk in a midnight choir. And I always loved that lyric, like a drunk in a midnight choir, because it reminded me of my dad, because my dad was a drinker. And I always kind of thought, you know, even as a child, the image, you know, in Ireland, the one day you did go to Mass, because we weren't a practicing Catholic family, but the one day that we all went to Mass was midnight on Christmas Eve. All the families of my town would gather at the church, and of course, the men were drunk, and, you know, they all stood at the back of the church, and the mothers and the children all went in and took part. But I remember, like a drunk in a midnight choir was such a powerful line. In my house, my dad would bring all of these guys home. And especially around Christmas, actually, it was always a big time in my family. There was all these guys that would arrive home with my dad, and they'd sit around the living room and they'd all sing and they'd talk, and it was about politics, and it was about, you know, it was just about friends of theirs, and they were kind of referred to, they were referred to loosely as my drunkles. Yeah. But they were basically guys that my dad was very generous with his friends, and so these guys would come home and stay in our couch for a few weeks. So while these guys were around, nightly there'd be gatherings with, like, you know, loads of cups of tea and bottles of vodka on the table and songs, and, you know, and so it was a wonderful time for me as a child to sit. And, you know, when these men or women happened to be in our house, which was kind of a halfway house really when I think about it now.
Really?
At the time when I was a kid, we didn't really have to get up and go to school in the morning, because everything was just chaos. You know, nothing was really, we were up at 3 o'clock in the morning listening to, and sitting either under the table or away from the table while the adults, you know, the lamp would be down low on the table and everyone would be kind of leaning in and they'd be singing or they'd be talking, and life was being discussed, and everything was being discussed in front of us. There was none of this, like, not in front of the children. Everything was on the table, and songs were very much part of that. So the idea for me now of taking out a guitar and singing a song, I kind of feel like it's absolutely part of our culture, and it's what I have to offer. I see myself as a musician. I see myself as a person in society, and a person who sings. That's what I do.